26, with the exception of specific language dealing with unborn human individuals. The board's consensus was that that's an undefined medical term. There's no medical definition for that term. And in disciplinary hearings, the board's required to have an expert. And the concern was the difficulty or impossibility of finding a medical expert to testify about the definition of a term of the regulation if that was left in, which would essentially potentially make the regulation unenforceable. So the board's goal of that hearing was to create a regulation with some teeth to it. I took that regulation that's passed to the Legislature Rules and Regs Committee, and they asked that the board have another hearing in which the word fetus, which was removed and put in the unborn human individual language again. There is another definition in the regulation pursuant to the statutes defining unborn child as a offspring of human beings from conception until birth. That one also might have some problems as it's reviewed by a circuit judge. That is not the board's problem. That is, that's also directly taken from the statutes, it's quoted directly. So what you're here today is to do what the legislature asked you to do, which was change the regulation back to the statutory language. And what it does, or what the implications of that in the future, it's not your decision today. Your decision is to pass this regulation pursuant to the statutory language.
Would you read the statutory language, please, so we know what we're...
Well, the original one is physician shall obtain based on available medical evidence, including testing and physical examination, the statistical probability of bringing an unborn human individual to term based on gestational age of the unborn human individual possessing a detectable heartbeat. And then I read the unborn child that's listed throughout several statutes.
I meant the part of it where the legislature says, where the law says, the medical board shall.
This one, well, I looked through the statute. That language isn't in there specifically in those individual statutes. However, there's another statute that says the board shall promulgate rules that effectuate the Medical Practice Act. All of these regulations have specific language on what physicians have to do. So it puts a burden on a physician which requires you to have a regulation pertaining to it.
And to be clear, last time we passed the regulation that the law stipulated, but with this language change that the board felt was not scientific language, etc.
Correct, and that was, it potentially would make it unenforceable. So the legislature said change it back. So that's what we're here today for. So with that being said, is there anyone here to speak for the regulation as written? Is there anyone here to speak against it? Being none, the board needs to decide if it wishes to pass this regulation.
A discussion point, this isn't our, you said this isn't our problem, but in the past, when we've passed a regulation similar to this, it went to court and the board ended up paying $90-some-odd thousand to defend a regulation that was questionable. Do you see a potential for that here?
Yeah, I mean, as a lawyer, yeah, I think the potential for a lawsuit to be filed on anything. Potentially. I mean, it's kind of hard. There are portions of this that I think are open for it. For instance, an administrative appeal. But that all depends on how or what case is brought before the medical board, what issues are brought. You know.
So the short answer would be yes.
Yes.
If we pass this, we potentially. And then can you explain for those of us what happened with the health department?
The health department looked at this in a similar light that the medical board did and had the same exact issues regarding defining certain terms within these as non-medical. And I don't know where they are related to that.
And you actually went and testified to the legislature and said, we're okay with the regulation, we're not okay with the non-medical language, or something to that effect.
Something to that effect. I basically said what I said today, which was the intent of the board was not to mess with the statutory language so much as to have a regulation with some teeth to it. However, I'll take it back and we'll have another public hearing to change it back, so.
Board have any
Kevin,
comments or questions? Go ahead.
a question, Kevin, so can the legislature not pass a law with the specific language without the need for the board to necessarily act on it? In other words, what I'm trying to ask is, so I don't know what the board will eventually decide on this, but there has to be a reason why 14 additional people who are mostly physicians, 12 out of 14, and two very smart lay people, that it comes to them. If it was just the legislature, then the legislature can make any law they want. Why do they force other 14 people to necessarily agree with them?
In short, because that's the job of various boards, I mean, they promulgate these, they pass these statutes that pertain to various, and they do it in every session that pertain to professions across the board. These statutes we're dealing with specifically state duties that physicians have to perform. Now, in short, if you've got a statute, it controls. It trumps a regulation every day.
Yeah.
But we have a Practice Act that says the board will promulgate rules to effectuate statutes pertaining to the Medical Practice Act, and that's what we're doing here. So this statute just simply regurgitates what's in this. So the regulation regurgitates what's in the statute.
Okay, thank you.
Verbatim.
So I'm not clear, we're not changing it to fetus, we're leaving it as.
Unborn human individual.
That the legislature, when Kevin brought that to the legislature, they said, we don't accept that, have another hearing. That's,
So what are the and it's a redundant question, I understand. What are the choices that the board has, if any?
To pass the regulation.
Just to pass it, has no other choice?
Why are we having a discussion?
Why?
Well, I mean, I think it's always open for discussion, but typically when you have a public hearing and there's some discussion on regulation, you'll have a statute that gives the board wide discretion on what the terms of the regulation could be. This one is just a regurgitation of the statute, so.
I move we pass it.
there's a motion and second that we pass proposed regulation 36 as submitted. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. So we need a hand vote. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All opposed? 1, 2, 3. The motion carries. 4. I'm sorry. 4. Motion carries not unanimous.